Episode 315 defined volume as the total amount of work you perform. Not a single set, not a single effort, the accumulation. Episode 316 showed you how to apply it intelligently. Add 1 rep, 1 set, 1 session. Then wait for the adaptation before you add again. Both episodes stayed in the gym. That's where we start. The gym makes volume measurable. You can count sets, track sessions, see the accumulation on a page. But volume is not a gym concept. It's a concept the gym reveals. And once you learn to recognize it there, you start seeing it everywhere else. Today, we leave the sets and reps behind. Not for application. That comes next. Today, we do something simpler. We notice where it is in our life already. Hey there, it's me, Core, and you're listening to Exercising Consistency, from fitness to flourishing. Before we look at specific places, we need a working definition that fits outside the gym. In training, volume is straightforward. Sets times reps times sessions. The total work performed over time. Outside the gym, volume is the same structure applied to a different object. It's the total accumulation of effort toward anything that matters. Not how hard you went in one moment, how long you stayed across many moments. There is a version of every pursuit that is brief. The project you start and abandon after 2 weeks. The skill you practice until the initial progress stops coming easily. The conversation you have once and never revisit. The commitment you make when it's new and exciting, and then let dissolve when the novelty fades. And then there's the version that persists. The project you work on for months. The skill you practice after the plateau. The conversation you keep having because the issue is not resolved and the relationship matters. The commitment you honor after the feeling that inspired it has passed. The difference between these two versions is volume, not intensity. The first version often begins with high intensity, enthusiasm, focus. The sense that this time is different. What it lacks is duration, the willingness to stay after the intensity fades. Volume in daily life is the accumulation of staying. The total time spent in the work after the easy part is over. The most obvious place volume appears outside the gym is in work. Not the job you have, the work you produce. Projects. Every meaningful project follows a volume curve. The beginning is intense. New ideas, rapid progress, the sense that you are building something. Then the middle arrives. Progress slows. The ideas are no longer new. The work becomes repetitive. This is where volume separates people. One person stays. Another starts a new project and repeats the cycle of initial intensity without ever accumulating enough volume to produce something finished. Skills. The first 20 hours of any skill acquisition produce dramatic improvement. You go from incompetent to functional. It feels like transformation. The next 100 hours produce marginal improvement. You go from functional to slightly better than functional. It feels like nothing. The person who only has intensity stops here. The person who has volume keeps going. They accumulate hours because they know the total, the immersion over time, is what produces mastery. Writing. A single session of writing can produce a paragraph, a page, a post. The intensity of the session determines the quality of the output. But a body of work, a book, a newsletter, a physical collection of deliberate thinking, is not produced by intensity. It's produced by volume, showing up again, adding to the accumulation. The writing that matters is rarely the product of one inspired session. It's the product of many ordinary ones. In each case, the person who produces lasting work is not necessarily the person with the most talent or the best ideas. It's the person with the most volume, the one who stayed in the game. Volume appears in relationships more quietly, but with deeper emotional consequences. Friendship. The early phase of friendship is intensity, shared interests, long conversations, the discovery of common ground. But friendships that last are not sustained by intensity. They are sustained by volume, the accumulation of small moments over years. The text you send when there is no occasion, the call you make when nothing is wrong, the presence you offer when presence is the only thing being asked for. The friendship that endures is the one where both people kept showing up after the initial intensity expired. Partnership. Romantic relationships follow the same curve with higher stakes. The beginning is often some of the most intense, but a partnership that lasts decades cannot coast on the intensity of the first year. It's built on the volume of the years that follow, the thousands of ordinary dinners, the hundreds of difficult conversations returned to rather than abandoned, the accumulation of small choices to stay when leaving would be easier. The intensity fades, but something more enduring takes its place as a result of the continuing commitment. Parenthood. Few experiences reveal the gap between intensity and volume as clearly as raising a child. The intensity of love for a newborn is uniquely transformational. It feels like nothing is asking too much to love and protect this new life that's yours to nurture. Then the sleep deprivation accumulates. The repetition sets in. The intensity does not disappear, but it is no longer sufficient to carry the demand. What carries the demand is volume, showing up at 3 a.m, again and again. Each instance is not that memorable or meaningful, but the accumulation is. These relationships share a pattern. Intensity is how they start. Volume sustains them. The person who only has intensity leaves a trail of relationships only just begun. Enthusiastic commitments that dissolved when the feeling did. The person who has volume stays long enough for the relationship to become something intensity alone could never produce. The most intimate place volume appears is in identity, your relationship with yourself. Not what you do, who you become. Habits. A habit is volume applied to behavior. One instance of flossing is negligible. One instance of meditation is negligible. So is one workout. But the accumulation of instances over months and years produces a self that flosses, meditates, and trains. The person is not built by the intensity of any single session. They are built by the volume of all of them. Character. The virtues you claim to hold are not proven by a single display. Honesty once is not an honest person. Courage once is not a courageous person. Discipline once is not a disciplined person. These qualities are proven by volume. The accumulation of honest choices over time, courageous acts when courage costs something, and disciplined moments when no one is watching. Identity is not a declaration, it's volume. Recovery. Even recovery has volume. A single night of good sleep does not restore chronic exhaustion. A single day of rest does not heal burnout. Recovery requires accumulation. Enough nights, enough days, enough weeks of doing less so the body and mind can return to baseline. The person who only recovers once and expects to be healed misunderstands volume. Recovery is not an event, it is a total. There is a pattern here. Volume appears wherever there is a gap between starting and staying. Starting is easy. It's powered by novelty, by hope, by the promise of the new. Every person you know has started something meaningful. A project, a relationship, a habit, a commitment. Starting is commonplace. Staying is the differentiator. It's powered by nothing except the decision to continue when the reasons to continue have become less obvious. When the progress is undetectable. When the feeling that launched the effort has faded and the effort remains. Volume in daily life is the act of noticing that gap between starting and staying and recognizing which side of it you occupy. Most people do not notice the gap. They start. The intensity carries them for a while. When the intensity fades, they interpret the fading as a signal that the pursuit was wrong. So they stop. And then they start something else. The cycle repeats. This is the year of experience repeated 10 times. Expressed not through the absence of effort, but through the absence of duration. The person who sees volume everywhere sees something different. They see that the fading of intensity is not a signal to stop. It's the signal that volume is now required. The work has shifted from starting to staying. And staying is the only thing that produces anything worth having. Noticing volume everywhere is a start. Application is necessary to begin closing the gap. In the next episode, we close this deep dive on volume by moving from recognition to practice. We look at how to apply volume intelligently in daily life. Which pursuits deserve your staying? Which ones deserve your leaving? And what happens to your sense of self when you stop starting and start accumulating? Until then, look at your life through the lens of volume. The projects, the relationships, the habits, the commitments. Consider the intensity of your effort at the start compared to how long you stayed, how long you continued after the intensity dissipated. The answer will tell you something about who you are becoming, not in a burst of activity, in the steady accumulation. To practice managing behavioral volume and become the person who follows through, join the Act Score Challenge. That's it for today. Catch you next time.